Okay, get this. What if I told you that the man who created the most logical, scientific detective in history also spent a fortune trying to convince the world that garden fairies were real? No, this isn't a riddle. It's the absolutely true story of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
So let's break this down, because it's a wild one. In one corner, you have the mind that gave us Sherlock Holmes, a character who was basically a human supercomputer built for logic. But in the other corner, you have that exact same guy who was a passionate public champion for talking to ghosts, psychic mediums, and yes, actual literal fairies. So the big question is, how is that even possible? How can these two completely opposite ideas live inside the same head? Well, that's what we're here to figure out. Think of this as a detective case, and the biggest mystery Arthur Conan Doyle ever left behind was himself. All right, let's start with the evidence. Clue number 1, the logic of Sherlock. To understand the man, you have to first understand his most famous creation. You see, before Doyle was a famous writer, he was a doctor. And one of his professors, a Dr. Joseph Bell, was the real-life Sherlock Holmes. This guy could diagnose a patient just by looking at the mud on their boots or the calluses on their hands. Doyle saw this, and his mind was just blown. He thought, that power of observation, that needs to be a character. And boom, Sherlock Holmes was born, pure logic and a deerstalker hat. And here's where it gets really crazy. Doyle wasn't just writing good stories. He was basically predicting the future of detective work. In 1890, his fictional detective, Holmes, is using fingerprints to solve a case. You know when the real-life Scotland Yard started doing that? 11 years later. The guy was literally writing the instruction manual for modern forensics. And the result? Sherlock Holmes became an absolute global icon. He's been played on screen more than 250 times. That is a Guinness World Record, by the way. He's beaten Dracula, he's beaten Hamlet, he's beaten pretty much everyone. So this hyperlogical character became one of the most enduring creations of all time. Case closed, right? Doyle was clearly a man of science. Well, not so fast. And now for clue number 2. This is where our investigation takes a sharp left turn into the strange. Because the man of logic was also a man who believed in, well, just about everything. So what happened? What could possibly make him change so drastically? The answer, in one word, is tragedy. Doyle suffered unimaginable loss. He lost his wife, Louisa, and then his son Kingsley died from pneumonia he contracted during World War I. When faced with that kind of grief, what can science and logic really offer you? For Doyle, the answer was nothing. So he started looking for answers somewhere else. His powerful imagination became his escape hatch. He wrote The Lost World, this fantastic story about a hidden plateau in South America where dinosaurs still existed. It was pure, thrilling adventure, a way to create a world where the impossible was suddenly possible. But here's the thing, he didn't just write about other worlds. He started to truly believe in them. He became the world's biggest celebrity advocate for spiritualism, convinced that you could communicate with the dead. And then came the Cottingley Fairies, a series of photos taken by 2 young girls, supposedly showing them playing with real fairies. And Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, staked his entire public reputation on them, telling everyone they are real. So, what is the final verdict here? Was he the brilliant scientist or the true believer? The answer is he was both. And his legacy isn't just one thing. It's 2 gigantic, world-changing ideas that seem to point in completely opposite directions. I mean, just look at his influence. On the one hand, with Sherlock Holmes, he essentially created the blueprint for the modern detective. Every crime drama you've ever watched owes him something. But then, on the other hand, with books like The Lost World, he helped invent the sci-fi adventure genre. This guy didn't just create a character, he created entire playgrounds for storytellers to use for the next century. And you can literally trace the DNA of that adventure story. Doyle writes The Lost World in 1912. It inspires a groundbreaking silent film in 1925, whose special effects go on to directly influence the creators of King Kong. And the whole idea of finding living dinosaurs on a remote island, does that sound familiar? It's the granddaddy of Jurassic Park. The man who gave us the modern detective also gave us the T-Rex at the movies. Okay, so we have all our clues on the board. The hyper-rational detective, the passionate belief in fairies, 2 massive competing legacies. It's time to close this case. How do we solve the puzzle of Arthur Conan Doyle?
Well, the final piece of the puzzle isn't Doyle himself, it's the era he lived in. The Victorian age was a time of complete and utter contradiction. You had incredible scientific leaps forward: electricity, evolution, the Industrial Revolution. It felt like science was on the verge of explaining everything. And yet, at the very same time, people were obsessed with ghosts, seances, and talking to the dead.
And there it is. That's the solution. Arthur Conan Doyle didn't have a broken brain. He was the perfect product of his time. He was one single, brilliant mind trying his best to navigate the two most powerful currents of his age: the cold, hard facts of science and the deep human need for faith. Sherlock Holmes was his answer for the parts of life that made sense, and spiritualism was his answer for the parts that didn't. In the end, maybe the question scientist or spiritualist is the wrong one. He was just a person looking for answers. He used science for what he could see and measure, and he turned to faith to deal with the grief he could feel. And perhaps that's the final twist. The man who created the world's greatest detective left us with one last incredible mystery to solve: himself.